Hello, CXC. Let's make some noise. It's our last night. Please, you are in the presence of technology royalty, one of the founding fathers of the internet as we know it today. Steve Wozniak, known as the Woz, has touched every person in this room. Woz, grab a seat. Oh, wow. I got to tell you, this is a moment.
Nice reception. Okay.
This is really cool. So we've had a chance to chat backstage, and we are just going to kind of free flow this and talk about all sorts of things. The gentleman sitting next to me clearly, in spite of the introduction we gave, needs no introduction. This whole week we've been talking about the fourth digital revolution. Everybody in this room is a product of the third digital revolution, microelectronics, digital and information technology. And this man here created a vast majority of that for us. So Woz, when we talk about the proverbial two guys in a garage, you're literally one of the two guys. Tell us about the founding of Apple, the real story.
Well, the real story is I'd always wanted to own my own computer, and my dad said it cost as much as a house, so I said I would live in an apartment. And I was really skilled from high school on when you couldn't get books about it. I taught myself how to design any computer that I could get a manual for. I could design what chips would make that computer, and I loved it. You love what you're good at. No other friends did it, no teachers, nothing in schools, anything, but I had my goal, and then I did project after project after project, extending my skills at designing things with the fewest parts and thinking so far out of the book. And came a point in time when, Steve Jobs would come in town about once a year. I loved the 5 years before Apple. We were just good friends, and we would drive to concerts together. I'd drive him up to college in Oregon. We would do all these things. We'd play pranks, and we'd play pranks on each other, and it was just like normal kids. It was very different. But he was away in Oregon, and I went to a club, and I discovered this chip called a microprocessor, and it was, like all those processors I designed in high school. So I sat down, and it was obvious. I knew the formula for my computer that I could own that was useful. A useful computer had to have 4K of memory. 5 years before that, the day I met Steve Jobs, I built a little small computer with 256 bytes of memory, so I was kind of like 5 years ahead of that point in time. And I saw the formula for the computer. Computers, back then, the expense, chips had come down in prices. You could buy an entire processor. I found one for $20. I couldn't afford Intel, $400. No money. Steve Jobs and I were in our young 20s. We had no savings accounts, no money, no rich relatives. We had no business experience, and Steve didn't even have any academic experience. I was at least a top engineer for HP. But so I saw the formula, but expense on computers was input-output. A teletype. You crank away and typing, you have a keyboard and it prints, prints letters out. That costs as much as 2 cars. So no human being, no normal person could buy that to have their own computer input-output, and you needed 4K of memory. And it cost so much. And I just watched the prices of everything come into play. My home TV was free for output. Keyboard cost $60. That's a few $100s today. That was the computer, and I built this computer up because I already had a terminal that I could type to the ARPANET. When the ARPANET, the forerunner, the inspiration for today's internet, was only 6 computers. MIT, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, Stanford Research Institute, Utah, and somewhere else. It was all it was, but I would get on it and read files, and I could run programs, and I could be a guest, this ARPANET, but I just converted my terminal by adding the brains, a microprocessor, and some memory, the right kind of memory, dynamic memory. You had to have 4K of memory to do useful things. That was enough for a computer programming language, basic. Who wants a computer at home? What individual wants a computer if all it does is the things the big mainframes did? Sales figures and inventory and salaries and all that stuff. You don't do that at home. Had to be a good game machine. And so I sat down, designed my computer, brought it down, and every 2 weeks I showed it off at the club. Eventually, and I was a hero, I passed out my designs for free. And I was writing my basic language to be like Bill Gates, who'd written a basic for the Intel microprocessor, and I wrote my basic and demoed it. Steve came into town, and it's not like that movie with Ashton Kutcher that shows Steve coming down to some basement, and I don't know what's going on in the world. I was a hero at the club. I took him to the club. He'd never been there. I took him there. to let him see what was going on. Not just my product, my computer, but to see all the people at the club, how they spoke, Stanford professors and everything, about computers for people who are going to change life, change communication and education and everything. And Steve watched all the interest around me, and that was when he suggested we start a company. He didn't know computers, so he didn't say a computer company. A company to make a PC board. He understood a PC board that would help people build my computer easier. Remember, I had passed out my design for free, no copyright notices to everybody in the club. And this computer was eventually going to become the Apple I after HP turned me down 5 times. I worked at HP and I wanted them to do it. I would never risk my job at HP. I had determined in my life I never wanted to go up a management levels. I never wanted to go up and run a company. I wanted to be an engineer at Hewlett-Packard making products for other engineers for the rest of my life. And I wouldn't risk that. So I proposed it to HP. They kept turning me down. No, they couldn't see any money, the value in the small computers. Good, put Steve Jobs and I in business. We started Apple twice. Our first start was a little partnership with a hand-typed letter by a third partner who had 10%, Ron Wayne, and then he sold out and for a few $100. But that was that was a little partnership. And the garage represents our humility. When you have no money, you have to work at home. And we had no savings accounts or anything, no rich relatives. So that just represents kind of the level we were at. And there were never a company in a garage. There were never more than about 2 people in the garage. And we only used the garage for a few hours a week to get the computers, boards that were built somewhere else, bring them to the garage, test them, and then drive the working computer boards to a store that would pay us cash. So we only had to test a few a week. But before we ever shipped this product, it was called the Apple I computer. And it showed the world the formula. Chips that present video to a television really is the formula for a personal computer. Keyboard and a video display. And every computer before the Apple I had a big old front panel of switches and dials. Every computer after it had a keyboard and a video display. So it really did change the world. But before we ever shipped one, we had the Apple II. I loved games. I was a game player. And down at Atari, I had designed my own version of Pong, and then I designed Breakout for Atari. And while I was down there, ideas flew in my head about a way you could create color for $0 instead of $5,000. Instead of a big old design I was an analog engineer too, differential calculus design, mixing sine waves for red, blue, and green. Rather than that, a number was a color. It's really strange. If you put a number, a digital number, zeros and ones, onto a wire, into a TV, the right way, the TV would think it was a color and you didn't need that $5,000 device, and that was going to be the heart of the Apple II. The Apple II was not only a great, easy-to-use computer, anyone who had one, pull out the manual and you're programming in BASIC the first day. It was the first time ever that arcade games were color. Think how important that is. It was the first time ever that arcade games were software programs instead of skilled engineers hooking wires up to little register chips that go up and down at the right time. My God, it was getting up to 100 and 200 chips per game at Atari. This was the first time a 9-year-old kid could spend a day writing a game that made things move on a screen. So that computer was a big revolution for gaming as well as computers. And I had a philosophy all my life that anything you do that's productive, like work, should involve a lot of fun and humor, like pranks and games.
Wow, that's amazing. Amazing. So
we had... Oh, by the way, so the Apple you know today got started from that machine, which was going to be all of Apple's revenues for the first 10 years of Apple. It was our only successful product, the one. We started with a great product, and it was worth a lot of money. We could build 1,000, sell 1,000 a month. I'm no businessman. I'm just an engineer. I'm an inventor. Steve Jobs goes and does all the business stuff, and ran us through all these times and set things up and makes all the phone calls and gets parts and things. So he sought the money, and he ran into our investor, Mike Markkula. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know, but we had 3 equal partners, founders of Apple. We each owned the same amount of stock. Steve Jobs and myself, our young kids, and Mike Markkula was the adult. And Mike was the one who told us, here are the people you hire to have a technology company, here are the positions, and here's what their roles are, and we got a lot of professional people around us. So Mike is really the one that built the company, but he taught a lot of marketing techniques to Steve Jobs. And the Apple II, our big successful product, the marketing on it was just, I was building what I wanted for myself, the way Elon Musk really built the Tesla for himself, and the way that Steve Jobs built the iPhone to be exactly right for himself. When you're building something for yourself and you care about a beauty or a simplicity or a smallness, then you do a great job.
Woz, I want to ask you a little bit more about Apple.
Oh, by the way,
no, please go.
Steve and I talked about what we should do. These computers were going to change life and improve life for people, but we really wanted to make the life of blind people more equal to the life of people who could see. All sorts of handicapped areas, but blind. And we succeeded so strongly because everywhere you go now, look at the sidewalk and everybody is basically blind.
So, Woz, you had a quote recently that I read, and I apologize if I don't get it verbatim, but Apple has now become the most valuable company in humankind. And it means very little to you, as we were talking backstage, because you didn't do it for the money, regardless of the ridiculous amounts that were generated. And if I remember what you said correctly, while you were proud, you didn't like to essentially minimalize the business into simplifications like human-based round numbers. That's not what makes a company great. What made Apple great?
Well, first of all, I was very objective as an engineer, and half the computing power of the world up to a certain point in time was used to convert between our human base 10 and the computer base 2. So base 10 numbers like 1 trillion. If you said 2 to the 30th, then I'll buy into it a little better. It's like a little more natural number. But the size of a company in value isn't the important thing. Are the products good is how I judge the company anyway. And I'm very proud of Apple. And just saying a company is first makes it a leader in a sense. It doesn't have to be a particular number. So I don't like to clue into what people say is numbers or what century or what decade had what characteristics. No, things happen when they happen.
So let's talk about one of your favorite projects we did backstage. Everybody knows that Woz is synonymous with Apple. What you probably don't know is there are myriad technologies that you touch every day that this man helped invent, including some of the color-based patents that you were talking about for doing your color translation, and a little company called CL9, where you helped to build the first universal remote, which has become almost as ubiquitous as the iPhone. Talk to us about CL9.
There was a point in time, long time ago, in the 80s, I guess, and at home you had a remote control for a TV and a remote control for a VCR. Everyone in America had 2 remote controls. I had the one hi-fi in the world that had a remote control, a Bang & Olufsen one. Don't happen to me, just by accident. Also, very few Americans bought into laser discs. They were popular in Europe and popular in Japan, but very little in America. But that gave me a 4th remote control. And then satellite television didn't exist yet. But the companies, the movie companies like HBO were broadcasting on satellite to the local cable companies. And if you built your own huge dish, you could point it at satellites and just pick up things like movies. There wasn't anything to subscribe to. So I built a huge dish and bought a receiver from a guy in Canada, and it had a remote control. So I had 5 remote controls. I'm going back and forth. I thought, I need one that does it all. And the idea I came up with was not a very economical idea, but boy, was it beautiful. You point your existing remote controls into the new device, and press a button, beep, 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 and it learns the code. And you press a few buttons in a row, and it learns the whole sequence by looking at the infrared that's coming to it. Now it repeats it. And this thing had all these different buttons, and it had 2 microprocessors inside. I programmed one of them myself, and then I said, I'm just going to hire a guy for the other one. And it was what a great little computer in the hand, but it cost $150. And then other people started coming out with these little $10 universal remotes that could really do a TV and a VCR and nothing else in one remote. But no, it was a really fun project. I left Apple to do it. I got this idea, and I talked one other engineer into it. I thought the 2 of us can do this project, and we did. So we left Apple, but I didn't really leave Apple. I didn't quit. I didn't lose a salary at Apple. I didn't lose my employment contract. I went on a blackboard and showed the executives at Apple what I was going to do so they'd know I wasn't starting a company that competes with Apple in any way. And I also offered it. Apple could have said, we want to build this universal remote. So no, that was a real fun time in my life. Had a lot of good friends. And during that time, I had some young children growing up, and I'm trying to do everything I can to give them elements of creativity. So eventually I said, no, I'm just going to leave it behind, and gave all of our equipment to somebody else who sold them for like 15 years.
Woz, you are a prolific inventor, and you hold multiple patents. Tell me the difference between an inventor and an engineer.
I hold a few key patents is a better way to say it, but
a few key patents that drive everything.
An engineer is very knowledgeable from school and learns skill sets and knows how to solve designs. You give them something to design, and we'll get it done. It could be analog, it could be bridges, it could be electronics, it could be whatever. It's not the same as a digital engineer. Digital engineering is doing a lot of things in a large project in sequence, and not one mistake can be in there. You have to debug everything. Analog engineering is high-level mathematics, up to calculus to design everything and fix them. It's in totally two different subjects. But an engineer can design things. An inventor gets an idea. I've met a lot of inventors through the Inventors Hall of Fame, which I'm in. And these inventors just were the sort of people like me that get an inspiration, an idea. Maybe I could build this special carburetor addition to my airplane or something, an attachment. And they'll go into the laboratory and kind of build one up and try to mock it up and make something and prove that their idea actually works. And they want their own laboratory. They want to run in. They have to be builders. And it's in your personality. By the time your personality settles down, 18, 23 years old, you are one of those people that keeps going out trying to create and build your own things, or you just want to do well because you've been well educated. So engineer and inventor, and I was definitely in the inventor category my entire life.
Well, we thank you for that.
So creator, I like to use the word creator or builder or maker.
Let me ask you a question. So, I think you're actually technically still an employee of Apple, are you not?
Yeah, technically, I'm the only one who's had an Apple payroll. We might need a backup microphone. I'm the only one that has been on the Apple payroll every single week since we started the company. Out of loyalty, I don't want to ever say goodbye to Apple. I mean, what could you do ever better or bigger than Apple in your life? So I still receive a small paycheck.
We're going to get you fixed up right here, Woz.
Oh, good. All righty. Sorry.
There we go.
It happens to my ear.
So let me ask you a question, Woz.
Yeah.
It seems you've gone on to innovate, and I don't mean to put this in a controversial way, but you seem to be spending a lot of time helping not only in the philanthropic side, but to regulate and help make open the environment you helped create. And I want to talk specifically about your role in the EFF and your thoughts on net neutrality, which has changed dramatically recently.
Yeah, a lot of your values you get when you're very, very young. And my father would talk to me about the Constitution, Bill of Rights, freedom, what we were all about. And, back then I believed almost all of the things everyone believes. And things like free speech and the Bill of Rights and all that was so important to me. So I've always been a hero for the underdog as well. When we were offered big money to start Apple, I said no at first. I want to be an engineer for life at Hewlett-Packard. But eventually I changed my mind because I could be an engineer for life at Apple. And I've never had anyone work for me, never would move up the org chart. I don't want to run companies. It's that politics side of things.
Yeah.
So what was the question?
Yeah, I think you got it. So your thoughts, you helped to essentially start
EFF,
the EFF.
Well, EFF, right. And EFF, when it started up, there were 4 of us on the board for the first year, and 3 of us put in the money that had the money, and then there was John Perry Barlow. And we were just talking about really dealing with ACLU, civil rights type issues as they would apply to computers. And I've been for civil rights my whole life. And I'm always for the smaller person against the bigger person, the one that has wealth, the one that has power, a company or a person or a government. I'm always for the small guy. That's just my personality, and other people are different.
Great. So, Woz, I want to ask you 2 more questions because we're getting the high sign, but you're Woz. We're going to go a little bit longer. So I have a question for you on some of your other philanthropic efforts. You've done a lot of things. You actually, many people don't know this, studied psychology. You became a teacher of children to help teach them, and your theories on this are amazing. Where do you spend your time philanthropically now? What moves you?
Now, I'll go back. When I was in 6th grade, I told my dad I'm going to be an electrical engineer like you. And second, I'm going to be a 5th grade teacher. And I did go back in our local public schools, and I taught 5th grade through 9th grade, and teachers I taught for 8 years straight. My course was 200 hours per year, wrote it myself, never used a book, and because that wouldn't be creative to use a book. And I never let press near it. I never let press near it because I didn't want press near children. Just my own thing. And I'm not political. I have a principle that I will never vote for a president, and I never have. Politics gets wasted. So where were we? We
were talking about. So let me
still
close.
in philanthropy.
Yes.
A lot of my philanthropy, of course, my own schools. When you're giving money to the schools and you have a ton of money, that doesn't have the same meaning as giving what's valuable, what's a sacrifice. Your own time is a sacrifice. That's why I started teaching. Because I really felt that, and some people know and some people don't, that 10 years, after Apple was successful, I had an airplane crash, and 5 weeks after I came out of amnesia, after 5 weeks, I called up Steve Jobs and told him I was going to go back to Berkeley for my final year to get my degree, except I wound up, instead of taking engineering courses, I took all the psychology majors courses, studying a lot about the brain, thinking about artificial intelligence, thinking about the differences, whether, and even, we don't know anything about the brain, and we claim we're making artificial intelligence out of AI. I believe the A and not the I. We don't know. You don't know where your memories are stored. You don't know that they're stored in your brain. You can't read it in any book. You can't find any proof. You can find that there are processing centers for memories in your brain, but you can't find anything that says the memories are in the brain. 35 years ago, I presented my professors with a comment that was stronger connection than in any book about where memories could be. And it's a farce, it's a joke, but you lose two things between the ages of 6 and 10. You lose your childhood autobiographic memories, and you lose your teeth.
I got a closing question for you, and then we're going to come back out for Q&A. I want to close with you, since you're bringing it up, on AI. And the singularity, the open AI debate, one side on the other, and some very famous people taking very strong stands on whether we're going to become human batteries for the robot overlords or whether this is a bunch of phooey. Where do you come out?
I was just believing, and we're getting closer and closer. We're looking at our phones, we're talking to them like we're talking to a human being. Someday it could be a computer that teaches kids and lets them go in their own directions for as far as they want to. And I really believed in it, and we're going to have self-driving cars that think like humans. And boy, I have reversed my position totally on the AI scheme, that all this stuff we make, we can show off machine learning and show Google 80,000 pictures of a dog, and now it can see a picture of a dog. It can't tell if it's a dog standing in front of a poster or a dog on the poster, but it can do it better than a human. And we call that intelligence. You take a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old child and say, that's a dog. And they know that it's a dog with limbs like their own arms and legs that are kind of soft and kind of hard and flexible and movable. And the tail waggles, so it must be flexible. And it's all driven by a brain that sees things in the world. So a child knows all the connections that make things. I mean, I don't even believe that self-driving cars, I think that's a big fallacy and not going to happen. And I really believed it up until recently that it would, but I kind of got suckered into it and spent a lot of money. I want it so desperately, but I think that it's decades off, and really worrying about, oh my gosh, our computer's going to be so intelligent they replace us because we don't want humans doing the thinking. That would have to be hundreds of years off in my mind. I have my reasons from an engineering point of view of what would have to be constructed and programmed and written to allow computers to be in charge of humans. So all the technology we build is really only going to help us humans live the life we want to live better.
Woz, I could do this all night, but we've got to get off stage and these guys come on. We're going to come back out, but before we go, on behalf of the team here, for me personally, this is a great highlight, and for the billions of lives that you've touched literally through your work and your amazing effort, I just want to say thank you. Steve Wozniak.